The Vikings did not disappear in battle. They vanished in silence after meeting people who refused to fear them. We remember the Vikings as conquerors, as raiders who burned shores and broke kingdoms. But far from Europe, across a cold and unfamiliar ocean, their story changed. They reached a land rich with timber and game, a land already lived in, a land that did not bend. The sagas hint at conflict. Bones and ruins whisper of tension. And then, nothing. No great victory, no final stand carved into legend. So what happens when a warrior culture meets an enemy it cannot dominate and cannot understand? At first, the Vikings believed this land would be easy. The forests were endless. The rivers were full. The soil was dark and alive. They built shelters the way they always had. They brought iron, axes, habits of command. And they expected fear. But the people they met did not flee. They watched. From tree lines, from river bends, from the edge of the firelight. The Vikings called them outsiders, strangers, people without walls. But these people knew the land in a way the Vikings never could. They moved without sound. They fought without warning. They did not seek glory. The first clashes were small. A stolen tool, a boat burned in the night, a hunter who never returned. The Vikings answered the only way they knew how, with force. Shields up, weapons drawn, a show of strength meant to end doubt. Instead, it fed. Because the enemy did not fight like Europeans. There were no lines, no clear battlefields. Attacks came, then vanished. Arrows from trees, blades in the dark, always retreat, always watching. The Vikings began to feel it first at night. Fires felt too bright, silence felt too loud. A warrior culture built on honor struggles against an enemy that does not announce itself. They tried trade. Iron for furs, tools for food. For a moment, it worked, but trust was thin. One misunderstanding could turn a meeting deadly, and it did. A gesture read as threat. A weapon raised too quickly. Blood spilled. After that, nothing felt safe. The Vikings started to realize something terrifying. They were not feared. They were studied. The locals learned their habits. When they slept, when they patrolled, when they were weakest. And slowly, the Vikings began to change. They stayed closer to their shelters. They traveled in groups. They stopped venturing far inland. This was not how Vikings lived. Bravery, to them, meant moving forward. But here, forward meant disappearing. Food became harder to gather. Losses added up, not in great battles, but in ones and twos. A man gone, a boat damaged, supplies ruined. No songs were written for deaths like these. Fear crept in quietly, not panic, doubt. Was this land cursed? Were the spirits against them? Some believed the locals were protected by powers they did not understand. Others thought the gods had turned away. Leadership fractured. Some wanted to stay and fight harder. Others wanted to leave while they still could. And then came the moment that changed everything. A larger clash. Short, violent, confusing, no clear winner. But when it ended, the Vikings understood one truth. This land would never be theirs. Not because they were weaker, but because they did not belong. They could not replace the people here. They could not scare them into submission. And the cost of staying was slow extinction. So they made a decision that went against everything they believed. They withdrew. Not all at once. Not announced. Families left first. Then ships. Then fires went unlit. Those who stayed tried to adapt. Some learned local ways, hunted differently, moved lighter. Over time, they stopped being Vikings. Their weapons changed, their clothes changed, their language softened. They married, they blended. They disappeared into the land and its people. Others returned across the ocean, but they returned quieter. Their stories were not heroic. They spoke of a land that resisted them without armies, a land that broke them without conquest. So the tales faded. No one wants to remember a place where they were not the strongest. What happened to the Vikings after that was not sudden. It was erosion. The ones who stayed lost their identity piece by piece. The ones who left lost their confidence. Back home, the world was changing. Kingdoms grew. Borders hardened. Raiding became riskier. The old Viking way was already dying. And across the ocean, their brief presence was swallowed by forests, rivers, and memory. For the indigenous people, life continued. They endured, as they always had. They did not record victories in stone. They carried them in survival. The lesson was simple and brutal. Strength alone does not decide history. Adaptation does. The Vikings were unmatched at war. But here, war was not the point. Somewhere beneath the soil of North America, iron rusts, not from a fallen army, but from a people who realized too late. There are places you cannot conquer, only leave behind. And sometimes, the greatest defeat is being forgotten.